now that you've signed up for one, you are on our mailing list. So we will try not to harass you too much, but we will keep you in the know for what we're up to. So just a couple words before we get started. We are working on a bunch of programming which will be posted on our website in the next few weeks, but our monthly meeting later this month on March 27th at 10 is a virtual meeting held over Zoom, so you have to sign up to get the invite information. It's called How the Property Tax Abatement Revitalized Philadelphia. It's going to be an interesting presentation with a couple members of the American Enterprise Institute. So sign up for that, come check us out there, and then we'll likely be back in person in April, finalizing those dates at the present moment. So with that, let's get into it. I'm going to introduce Laura Spina, one of my favorite DAG colleagues on the DAG steering committee. After a 29-year career in the City Planning Commission, where she held the roles of the Director of Community and Comprehensive Planning for 11 years and was the Center City Planner for 18 years, she has moved into the private sector. So she is a planning, I can't even read my own handwriting. She's a planning department manager at Michael Baker International, and one of our favorite knowledge and expertise sources here at DAG. So take it away. We will have a Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, save them, and we'll get to those later.
Thanks, Eli. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see you, especially when it's so crazy out weather-wise. So it's wonderful to have you here tonight. And I'm very happy to introduce to you Jessie Lawrence. Jessie and I have worked together for over 18 years. When I became the Center City Planner at the Planning Commission, Jessie was serving as project manager at the Redevelopment Authority, and we've worked on a lot of projects together over the years. Jessie has over 20 years experience in public and privately driven real estate development, urban planning, and land policies. His experience has primarily been with the Philadelphia Redevelopment Authority, the Philadelphia Land Bank, and the Housing Development Corporation. After a brief stint in the private sector, Jessie returned to PHDC as the Director of Real Estate. In that role, he directed a multifaceted land management team in securing interagency approvals that have allowed for the sale and disposition of publicly owned land throughout Philadelphia. Much of this work has gone on to foster the most recent affordable housing, tax credit projects, and social impacting developments that exist today. His team's work at PHDC has directly supported the production of affordable home ownership opportunities marketed by the Turn the Key program under City Council's Neighborhood Preservation Initiative. He most recently worked in Mayor Parker's administration as Associate Deputy Mayor for Planning and Strategic Initiatives. In October, he was appointed as the Director of the Department of Planning and Development. Jessie is a Philadelphia transplant and lives in Northwest Philly with his wife and 2 sons, and his oldest is the same age as my daughter, so it's been fun swapping parenting stories besides work. His father's a professional DJ, and music has always been a major part of his life. Jessie loves sports, especially baseball and the Phillies. And though he grew up as a Giants fan, we finally converted him to the Eagles. So please welcome Jessie.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight, especially since between weather and venue, we've had to reschedule, I forget how many times. So it's wonderful to have you with us tonight. So why don't we start? The Department of Planning and Development is really an umbrella department with lots of agencies under it, and its organization can be pretty confusing. So why don't you take a minute to walk us through how the department is organized?
Sure, it's a multi-divisional department. Those divisions are divided amongst what folks really know as the mostly the planning and zoning department, or that division which houses our planning commission. Planning commission is really obviously the group in the commission that is charged with, you know, guiding the change and investment when it comes to the city of Philadelphia's built environment. That staff shapes the physical existence of the city. It really shapes the physical development of the city as well. It includes the zoning and legislation of it all, capital programming, and also the budget as well. That is where we have the monthly meetings from the commission, where we see zoning bills, city plans, things of that nature, amongst some other things. We also have a division of development services, which is basically the small but mighty team that guides us through a permitting and approvals process. Be surprised. I mean, I did have some time outside of the city, but I had come to understand that it wasn't so easy getting through that process, right? Entitlement wise. So I had the knack of understanding who to call and how to do certain things, being able to tap Laura's shoulder when I jumped out the window to the private sector. But understanding that that division was really kind of important in helping people understand the complexity of it all for a process which is not so easy or so anticipatory in some cases. But that is what that division does. There's also the Division of Housing and Community Development. Once upon a time, that was OHCD. You'll find, and I know you all know, DPD, Planning and Development. It's just like the home of every single acronym that you can probably think of in the city sector. But DHCD, they're the ones that manage a lot of the affordable housing programs that come through the city. They facilitate a lot of the funding that comes from the federal sector, from the Fed, things that are administered through the state and down to us, put out affordable housing RFPs for gap financing. A lot of those rental and landlord relief programs you hear about, such as small landlord rental improvement funds, stuff like that. A lot of that is administered through DHCD in collaboration with the city council and the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative, which is one of many initiatives that have come throughout the year, but they're pivotal to that. Also, I think within planning and zoning, you might hear about the Historical Commission and the Art Commission, respectively, and obviously associated with the two things that they're titled after, making sure that their art is commissioned in a way where it is part of a project and not supplemental to a project. Historical Commission is obviously has a home here in Philadelphia because we are such a historical city and old city, and it's just its purview is obviously making sure that we're preserving opportunities that should be preserved. We also have obviously an executive administration like anybody else, any other department, where we have our folks on the back house things, HR, finance, that type of thing. We house CDR, we house a public art review, city project reviews, but collectively all those different departments come together to basically substantiate a good way of growing Philadelphia. I think that we have a tremendous team. I got a great roster of deputies that really lead all of those departments, that really help me make the decisions on a daily basis and operate a unit that it really, I think, does well to serve the city. And as director here, it's my intention to be the great connector in ways that I can possibly, in every way that I can possibly be. Within DPD, something I should share is that we're also partnered with our quasi-public agencies such as PHDC. And again, more acronyms, I know, but PHDC, the Housing Development Corporation, they are the folks that staff the land bank. So they are a crucial partner in what we do. The land bank obviously being the real estate leg of the city for publicly owned land, whether it's publicly owned land that's actually owned by the land bank or owned by the city of Philadelphia itself, PHDC itself. Once upon a time, there was something called the RDA. Now it's PRA, showing my age, because when I got to the PRA, it was the RDA. But all of those different landholding agencies, they all come through the land bank. And that staff is PHDC. So they are quasi-public and they're not necessarily city, but they're certainly under that umbrella. And one of the things that I really kind of took joy in coming through to PRA, I'm a planner and architect at heart. And one of the things I saw some value in when I got to RDA was being able to talk to folks across the street like Laura, and understanding that, there needs to be some consideration and some sort of synergy between not just our land and what we have, but what we do with it and grow sustainably and grow, smartly and intelligently. So hope that's helpful.
No, that is. Thank you. And the housing clearly has been a focus of Mayor Parker's. She has a very ambitious goal of creating or preserving 30,000 housing units in her term. She recently announced the appointment of Angela Brooks. Could you talk a little bit about how Angela's role fits in with DPD
Sure.
and how all of that works, since the housing work isn't just in a single agency.
Exactly, and that's you hit the nail on the head. So by the time 30,000 units rolls out, I'll probably have 30,000 more gray hairs in my head at this point. But Angela's important. I believe she's a monster grad. For those of you who don't know, Angela was formerly the president of the APA. She is, for the lack of a better word, a badass. She's awesome. And we brought her here to the city to be able to lead the charge, or actually manage the program as it moves from fruition to implementation. It's going to take a lot. It's obviously going to take a lot. One of the things that executive order showed last week was how we need to have a lot of people that typically aren't in the same room to do what we need to do. One of the things that the mayor said is that we need to all row in the same direction. I don't have the ability to manage that from top to bottom because I have a whole department to run. So we had this bright idea that there needs to be somebody that lives directly in the mayor's office, because in a lot of what we've looked at and, formulating a plan that is soon to come in the next couple of weeks, we've looked at the power of kind of leadership and direction coming from the top. And by the top, I mean the mayor's office, right? So we needed to make sure that we had some sort of presence in City Hall with the proximity to the mayor, to not only be the senior housing advisor to the mayor at any given moment, but to actually just kind of eat, sleep, and dream about 30,000 units. DPD doesn't go away in this process at all, because we certainly are the ones that are, going to be the one making the connections for Angela, connecting Angela to the folks that are doing the work, not just on the user end, but the actual practitioner end. But that will be a partnership. That is going to be something I'm quite excited about, because Angela, it comes from a space where she has a tremendous amount of experience. I think that there's, in thinking about how we're doing this 30,000 unit plan, there's been a lot of benefit in talking to peer cities and peer metros about how they've done things. And Angela's been in some other places to really do this, to do the work, to look at the work and be able to understand how certain things have gone in different places. The comparable kind of experience and knowing that we have a strong city council presence here in Philadelphia. She comes from Chicago, where the aldermans really run the show and really kind of help get things going. So she brings that mindset where she's going to have to help us navigate. We're certainly here to help her navigate. It will be a partnership, but Angela will be working closely with us, but also managing the 27 different departments that are named in that executive order, in terms of reaching our goal and making sure that that executive order, which was put out to really kind of address executive order, but an outline of barriers and recommendations for process improvement, which we got a lot from Chicago, which is why it's important she's coming here. But she's going to be pivotal to managing that, project managing it for the most part. But we've provided the foundation, we've provided the framework for a plan that is going to come out, and we're just going to tap her and work very closely with her to carry it out.
All right, great, thank you.
Sure.
You started off by talking about, development services, that it's a really small group. Who can take advantage of the services that division provides?
So I think that, case in point, we have the Wanamaker building, which is obviously no longer Macy's. I don't know where I'm going to get my last minute blazers anymore. I'm going to have to figure that out. There's been a time or two where I've come to work without a jacket or the right shoes, and I've just had to run to Macy's. So I got to figure out a plan B. But thinking about TF Cornerstone, who's coming to town, right? And their idea of adaptively reusing that. Our first question was, okay, how are you going to do that? You know what I mean? We're certainly at a time where we're thinking about, office to residential conversions, and just, not necessarily placing that in the same bucket, but thinking about how this big giant footprint that is kind of atypical of anything that's been built recently, how are you going to navigate that? If it is going to be residential, how? What are you going to need in order to really achieve the permitting that you're going to have to? So I think that we have this outside developer who's coming to town that's really kind of working on a very complex asset. Development services is going to be able to tell them exactly what they need to be anticipatory about. And one of the things that executive order that came out a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that we want to come out of that is recommendations for, providing developers with the ability to really be a little bit more clear about the timeline when it comes to entitlement. And I think that part of that is going to rely heavily on development services, making sure that they have the right people in the room. Again, not just thinking about the Wanamaker building and adaptively reusing that building, but if we're working on something that's a clean slate, vacant land, at what point in time does streets come in? At what point in time does the water department come in? Are you going to be subject to stormwater management requirements? That type of thing for people where, I mean, we certainly have a development checklist, right? But folks don't always refer to that. So I certainly think that there's value in being able to get all the right people in the room to make sure that there is an understanding of what's coming down the pike. And that is what development services does. It brings the different departments that are part of the permitting process into a room to have a conversation about what I think all those different departments anticipate as being kind of hurdles, really kind of making them not rings of fire, but making them hurdles that we can clear easily if we know what we're trying to do.
Great, thank you. So it's interesting when you started talking about the organization of DPD that you started off talking about the division of planning and zoning.
Yeah.
Because very often when the mayor talks about DPD, it's always in terms of the housing side.
Right.
That it's almost like DPD is the ugly stepchild, even though, as you said, most of the work of that division touches on every corner of the city.
Right.
So let's start with some of the agencies that are under DPZ. With the Historical Commission. In 2018, there was the Historic Preservation Task Force under Mayor Kenny that had released a number of recommendations to strengthen preservation in the city. One of them is that it's very hard for us to preserve what we don't know we have,
right,
and to start a survey of the city. The Historical Commission got a grant from William Penn Foundation and the state to create a database and to start that survey. Where's it going now? So
we've pivoted to something called Treasure Philly. And that is this kind of local level assessment of, well, it started in a particular area called BGE, Broad Germantown and Erie. We've released that to kind of the local level folks to be able to say, look, what do you treasure as something? You know what I mean? We can, from downtown, we can take a look and we can have these conversations about what we think is important, an asset to conserve or preserve. But I think that out of that came the Treasure Philly effort, which is literally just this effort to expand those surveys in areas. I think the pilot that is Broad Germantown and Erie has been a good model. I think we plan on expanding that, but it is something of that nature. It is housed in the efforts that we do see as Treasure Philadelphia, because I think that we certainly place a lot of value in making sure that we are really applied in how we designate things historically, right? I think that there is a fine line, not even a fine line, a gray area, depending on who you're talking to, but I certainly think there are levels to it. I think that there is very applied decision-making around what should be designated historical, whether it's an asset or an overlay or whatever the case may be. But I think that, when I say levels to it, I think that we need to think about what we're preserving, but then what we're also subjecting the people that live in those areas to, methods of preserving as well. And you probably need to make sure that they have the access to do the things as far as home repairs, asset repairs, that type of thing, making sure that we're not pricing them out the ability to do just that.
Well, that leads to my next question, because another recommendation was to create the idea of tiers for designation. So property owners didn't necessarily have the same requirements depending on the tier that their property was designated. There was some progress on that before the change in administrations. Is the idea of tier designations moving forward? It's
not necessarily, I wouldn't say that it was moving forward, but I won't say it is completely abandoned as well. I mean, my previous response kind of stands. It really does merit some sort of deeper dive, because I don't think, and I think folks would agree, I don't think it's a unilateral approach, right? I feel like we have to figure out how we define that type of approach. And I certainly take a little issue with the tiered approach, because I don't want to imply, quality being better in some places other than others. So I think we have to play the semantics game. But I do understand that there, again, reiterating that there are levels to it. I do think that we need to think about how we do that, what that kind of what that distinction between preservation and conservation, what the in-between might be for that. But I definitely feel like we need to think about that. And I won't say that that is taking a tremendous amount of traction in the last year or so, but it's definitely something that we are considering and we're definitely thinking about strongly.
Good, because I think a lot of people are interested in that, so that we can recognize the importance of these different neighborhoods and what the different communities see as valuable in their communities.
And I mean, I hear you 100%, but I think the demographics of these different communities is something that needs to be considered. You know, it's hard to designate one area, one thing, and then, you know, apply that kind of same model to a different part of the city, you know, which might differ in affluence or access to resources, or the ability to really just kind of maintain their assets. You know what I mean? So, you know, that firing off all those different agencies a second ago, thinking about how important DHCD is to connecting people to the ability to, you know, access those home repair programs, PHCC and DHCD, making sure that we don't necessarily eliminate the access to that type of thing, making sure that we are congruently matching up all these different programs with the overlays and the implications of designations. Like it's crazy. It's a Tetris game, you know what I mean? And I think that it's definitely something that's on the radar. And I'd be happy to probably talk more about it once we probably get a little bit further.
Well, that's good. And that Tetris and all those agencies just shows how important development services is.
Spot on.
Because it's so difficult to navigate all of that.
Spot on. Spot on.
So Planning Commission has really been in the spotlight lately for a number of big projects.
Oh, wow. Really?
Really? Yeah. I wonder what they are. So, you know, after 2 years of talking about having the Sixers Arena on Market Street, and then
What arena are you talking about?
and their decision to stay in South Philadelphia. But the upside is that it did bring focus back to Market Street.
Absolutely.
and East Market. Now that we know the arena is not coming there and the Macy's is closing, as you said.
Yeah.
And the paper today talked about how St. John the Evangelist is also in need of funds.
Yeah.
What are the plans for Market East?
So quick answer to that is that we are planning as we speak, right? It will be important to know that we're going to make some sort of announcement very, very soon. It'll be along the lines of what that team will be putting it all together or carrying that out. And it'll be along the lines of what the priorities for the future are, right? So one of the things that the administration has made very public is that the mayor, as you may or may not know, has business roundtables for different sectors, right? One of them being Center City Rejuvenation, right? So that particular group has presented some recommendations, some of which are overlapping with what should happen or what they think should happen along Market Street. They will be at the table along with many of the other stakeholders, property owners, anybody that has any dog in the fight when it comes to what we're doing along Market Street. One of the things that the arena did, obviously, like you said, was really bring the attention to what the momentum could be, what the vision could be, and the fact of the matter is that needs to be some attention along the corridor. So, you know, in that effort, there was a lot of engagement with property owners, folks like the ones that do the work, you know, CCD, the kind of quasi-public partners along the way, property owners, I said that already, but a lot of different people that have some sort of idea of what should happen. And not just the ones that have an idea of what should happen, but the ones that will be directly affected by any arena, right? And then obviously the property owner that is Mesa Rich, which is the Fashion District property owner. At some point in time in the very near future, we're going to bring all of them together. And that will be under the leadership of the city. The Planning Commission is, like I said, thinking about, or actually preparing what that master plan could be. What I can share is that that will be a short-term and medium and long-term. If you're a planner, you know there's always short, medium, and long, right? But the short term is really kind of seeing what do we do now to make sure that we activate this in time for 2026. And then the long term, intermediate, medium, and long term will be what do we need to do to position ourselves as far as being able to accurately identify you know, investment opportunities, what that vision is, what we should do. my gut says that, you know, in the previous plans, I mean, you were part of the 2009 plan, right? There's a 2023 plan that CCD put out as a result of the arena coming out. It's prime time for density along Market Street.
Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, whether the plan was from 2009 or 2023, that's the common denominator in the conversation. It's a theme. So we have these single-use lots, which are underutilized, but, you know, highest and best use. You know, you were part of my go-tos when it came to test fits and what can we do, Laura? How big can it be and how high can it be? Everything along Market Street can be big and it can be high. And I think that one of the things that did come clear in the last 2 years, arena or not, I think we're done with big box retail along Market Street. You know, one of the things that the mayor kind of talked about time in and time out throughout the town hall process was the glory days of Gimbals and the Litz brothers and all. It's great to talk about, but those days are done, right? So, you know, thinking about what Macy's, what that space becomes, we obviously don't think a fourth-floor department store is going to come. How does that divvy up? You know, if the pandemic didn't happen, what would the fashion district, what would that be? You know what I mean? And to what extent should that be right-sized? I think that the arena coming, there was clearly an opportunity to look at that asset and right-size it. But now that it's not coming, what exactly does that space become? Does it become all retail? I think that we have proof of concept in East Market in the 1100 block. And that was kind of something that intended to pave the way. Certainly didn't get, I mean, I think it got the attention. I still think it's getting the attention that it gets, but it also, you know, the impetus that it was meant to be got stalled out by the pandemic. But it's funny because when I first got here, and I've been working on Market Street for years, and one of the things that I just remember that block being is being able to, I think I might have bought my first mattress from that 100 block or something like that. It was crazy, but like, it's just it's a proof of concept. I think it has the ability to show, I mean, I think it does show what the rest of these very large blocks can be. Thinking about how some of those assets are really kind of vacant and you know, emptying out. Thinking about how some of those federally owned assets are probably not going to be occupied anymore. There's some questions about whether or not there are going to be some vacancies in addition to that. And then just thinking about why, you know, why some of these stores have been vacant for many, many years. And just understanding that we need to do that. I mean, it's a prime opportunity. Market Street is the main street between two very important neighborhoods. It's Chinatown to the north, it's Washington Square West, and I say two, but really three neighborhoods, Midtown Village as well. But I mean, it's time for Market Street to get the treatment that it does. It's not just meant for people that work on Market Street to go downstairs and buy a mattress really quick. It's also for people to, you know, come off the south side of that block or the north side of the block, really kind of come and it shouldn't be the divider, it should be the connecting opportunity. So I think that these next few months are going to be really interesting. I think that I agree with you, and I agree with many other people that feel like that Market Street has really gotten a high profile opportunity that it needs to get as a result of the arena. If there's anything that came out of that, it's the attention that Market Street has gotten. And quite honestly, it's not just about development. It's about creating a space that's also safe, attractive to people. It's not just a destination for Philadelphians. It's a destination for the metro area. You know what I mean? And it's connected by transit out to Yahoo. Any and everybody can get to it. You know, so it's SEPTA's job to make their system much more attractive. It's the police department to make it safer. It's Clean and Green to make that, you know, safer. It's the ability for us to harness the momentum as to what's going on in Old City and bring some of that streetscape activity and visioning down to the corridor and, you know, connect it between the mall and City Hall. But I think it's a good time to be a part of the conversation. We certainly won't move without bringing the right people to the conversation, but we certainly don't want to rush either. We want to make sure that we have a good understanding. I mean, there's obviously going to be, and this has been stated in the public, but, you know, our friends at Comcast and the Sixers, they still want to be part of the process. So we want to know what they're contributing to this as well. You know what I mean? But it will be super comprehensive. And I'm talking to the former director of comprehensive planning, so it's pretty cheesy to say that to you. But it will be a well thought out process, which we will make some real key announcements very, very soon.
Well, Market East has so many assets, as you said. The transit, it has, broad zoning. There's
Mhm.
vibrant neighborhoods around it. Why is it such a tough nut to crack to get development on Market East?
I think that, in my opinion, I feel like, we look at the 2009 plan, which was kind of thinking about the casino coming. We look at a 2023 plan, which was thinking about an arena coming. So I think we kind of take this big catalytic approach and we're reacting to the catalytic approach. And I've been advocating for, okay, let's reverse it and let's be proactive about it, right? And I do think that, Macy's kind of set the stage for just a real, these last few years, honestly. It's not just Macy's closing, it's Target closing, it's Wawa closing. So you have these big kind of names that are just willing to take a chance to say, hey, look, we'll do it, we'll jump in, you know what I mean? But we've seen what's kind of ran them away. It's crime and it's safety. So I think it's crime and I think it's safety. It's why we have a giant Marriott facing Filbert Street as opposed to Market Street. So I think that, if we're talking about what has changed, we've attracted new opportunities, and we've also ran those new opportunities away in a matter of epic timing. Like, it's been quick. So I think that we have proven to ourselves that it's hard to sustain things with existing conditions. And I think that now it's propping it up in a way. And I think the pandemic played a good role into it too, because I feel like there was a level of uncertainty that came with that. We're talking about a time where we're just now returning back to office. So there's been kind of this organic deterrence, if you will. And I think we have the opportunity to reposition ourselves to not just react to what's going on, but now we got to be proactive. We don't sit back and wait till another big proposal comes. You know what I mean? So it's a time to really approach it in a way where we're looking at, we're being anticipatory about what we can leverage. Like I said, we have East Market as a proof of concept, and we can have the ability to mirror that throughout the corridor.
Well, and I think too, cities in general tend to be very resilient. There's ups and downs throughout history, and pandemic obviously was one of those crises that came along.
Right.
Now it's really the emptying of a lot of the offices.
Right.
And as you said, federal government might move out of even more.
Yeah.
It gives that real opportunity for what could be next.
Yeah.
So what kind of a role will the Planning Commission play in shaping what that vision is?
So we are planning on rolling out an update to the comprehensive plan, right? And that's probably rolling out by the end of the year, right? And I think what that comprehensive plan will do is it will take into account very recent reports like what came out from Center City yesterday, looking at the fact that we've grown. And guess where we grew? We grew right here in Center City. And that 2024 report is coming after the 2023 report, which said we have way too many apartments. We have way too much housing in Center City. But guess what the 2024 report said? We did well on absorption, right? So the thing is, this 30,000 unit plan is really going to make sure that we are promoting the opportunities to not only, provide new housing or alternatives to housing for the people that live here, but we want to retain the talent that comes here. When folks graduate from all these great schools that we have, we want to give them the opportunity to stay here, right? And I hate to say it, but every Philadelphian doesn't want to live in a row house, right? So we're thinking about the things that have been built here in Philadelphia, especially in Center City, that added unit count that we've gotten. We're looking at that whole, 19123, whatever, above Callow Hill and below. Yeah. We're looking at all that stuff that you see from the expressway. Those aren't row houses. Those are big, dense buildings, and people are ready for that here in Philadelphia. There's still plenty of row houses to build and plenty of row houses to move into, but what we definitely need to do is we need to diversify our stock. And if we're talking about a bigger, badder, more dense Market Street, this is the time to do it. We have the proof of concept, like I said, East Market, but again, we have a report that also says that we grew in our center core more than anywhere else. And 1 out of 8 Philadelphians live in Center City. And that's not in a row house. You know what I mean? So we have the ability to guide that type of development. We have the ability for our comprehensive plan to suggest that type of thing in a very effective way. you know, the land holding agencies don't do anything that's not bound by that comprehensive plan. So in a place where we have a good grasp on what we own public sector wise, we're going to lean on that. So I think that the comprehensive planning and the planning commission will be a very important part of that process and how we grow and guiding our growth as well.
That's good. Another process that they were a big part of was the public engagement around the future of the Roundhouse.
Yeah.
And it's really not just the Roundhouse itself. There's a lot of land just to the south of it.
Mhm.
There's the Redevelopment Authority land at,
Mhm.
800 block of Race Street. What's the next step for the city when it comes to dealing with that property?
So I don't want to say that we actually have a position on it just yet because we don't, administration wise. I don't think that there are any clear next steps as defined as far as where we want to go. But we definitely see ourselves maybe seeking some development proposals for it, whether that's around the reuse of it or not. But we want to be open to that. We also know what kind of asset we do have in the Roundhouse. We also know that it is brutalist architecture that might present some complexities in repurposing as well. So I think that no matter what we do as we figure this out, we want to remain open to all the opportunities. We want to remain open to whatever the discussions around that will be. But I think if it's a city asset, chances are it'll have to be some sort of competitive opportunity, which we will welcome we will only welcome qualified proposals. We expect to have a significant dialogue about it, to be honest with you, because it's high time for it, you know what I mean? But it is also a location in Chinatown where we've already been very clear about the need for housing, right?
Mhm.
So we see a lot of opportunity in aligning with that at that site, and it's available kind of tracts of land around it as well. But those are going to be key to the next few years when it comes to developing in that area. But I think the Roundhouse is an open discussion. There has been no determination of whether or not to keep it or not. We certainly welcome any dialogue when it comes to it for sure. But we want to be realistic about what goes into preserving an opportunity like that.
Well, I think it'll be a great development opportunity when the city does issue their RFP.
I agree.
Another development opportunity is really down at the stadiums.
Yeah.
There's, a lot of land down there that's just used for parking.
Yeah.
I think the teams have finally realized that there is a higher and better use for all of that land than just the parking. What's the status of a master plan for down there?
Well, whatever that status is, we have to make sure we have room for people to tailgate, because one of the first things people want to know is where I'm going to tailgate, right? But I think that, to your point, it presents an extraordinary opportunity to really add a lot of what's not existing down there. We have a sea of parking lots, which obviously are not the highest and best use down there, right? But there is a ton, and don't get me to lying about what goes into untangling an entanglement, but the leasing and the title ownership and all of that stuff, everything that goes into making sure that there are approvals to actually do the things on land where it's not much on it, but there's a lot paper-wise associated with it. I think one of the inspirations has been really kind of what you see around the country and kind of redoing these types of areas and understanding that therein lies the ability to really kind of capitalize. I mean, it's what we were trying to do down the street, understanding that there is a draw to an 18,000 seat stadium. Multiply that by 3 or 4 and then some when it comes to the link. There are a lot of people coming down there. So what else can we capitalize? It's not just Xfinity Live, right? So it's making these, somewhat desolate areas at certain times of the day, activating them, right? So, we're bringing some life to kind of supplement these venues. It's not just, the retail, it's not just the like I said, the Xfinity Lives, but it's also bringing homes and beds and just, again, that's how you activate something, right? So I think that it presents, like I said, an extraordinary opportunity. I think that there's no concrete proposal just yet. We have seen some very very vivid images and renderings, but all of that has to consider what it takes in terms of entitling those types of projects, whether it's certain phased approaches, whether it understands the complexities of, I mean, you know, this city ordinances and processes that go into that. And even just making sure that there is, you know, making sure that the Sixers and Comcast are ready to play nice while we're all doing this, right? So I think it presents a massive opportunity. The inspiration that I think the mayor certainly saw was the Battery in Atlanta, right? And I don't know if anybody's been to Atlanta and saw the Battery, and it's the relocation of the Braves to Cobb County. So it really isn't Atlanta. It's like suburban Atlanta. So, but nonetheless, I think if Atlanta can do that, we certainly can do it in South Philadelphia, because there's much more around what we would be doing in the stadiums down there than the grassy plains and strip malls that are around the Battery in Atlanta. But I think, again, it is, to my point earlier, just kind of building something new and exciting in Philadelphia and diversifying what the housing stock could be, or what your office spaces could be. You know, it's leveraging what's going on at the Navy Yard down there. I think it's completing the stretch from City Hall all the way down to the river, not just going east, but going south as well. But it certainly presents an opportunity, which I think is going to it's going to be a dance. Certainly going to be a dance. To the same effect that the arena was, there will be a tremendous amount of stakeholder engagement to make sure that we are doing everything we need to do the right way, making sure that any and everybody that needs to be part of the conversation is in fact part of the conversation. It's massive, but I mean, we're still going to have to talk to the community, make sure they're part of the process. But, you know, I think what it'll end up doing is prompting a series of improvements infrastructure wise. I think that we need to make sure we look at what that connectivity is when it comes to 95, and, you know, what Patterson becomes. And you know, there's thoughts about, you know, if that station would be able, that subway station down there would be able to sustain what would be coming. And I think it's more work that I'm going to have to do.
Well, you've been in the position almost 5 months.
Yeah.
And I know that the administration has laid out some very ambitious goals, but what are your goals for the department in the next couple of years?
So one of the things that, like I said this a little bit earlier, but one of the things I took pride in is being able to have these conversations across the street when I was at PRA. And I think, you know, if anybody's familiar with the process, and I won't bore you with it, but it takes some level of collaboration where, well, at that point in time, and I think historically, one side would only talk, the right hand of the agency and department would only talk to the left hand of the agency if and when it had to, right? And I want to eliminate that. I want to be the one with both hands and saying, all right, talk, you know? And I think that I certainly want to make sure that that is not the case, that there is a lapse in communication. And I won't say there's a lapse in communication. I just want to make sure that there's much more comfort in having those conversations, unsiloing the silos where they kind of exist to a certain extent, making sure that, you know, we're going to have to do all of this 30,000 together, right? It's going to have to happen together. And it can't happen in silos, understanding that I certainly want to reflect that, you know, housing is in fact important to me, but I also want to reflect that, you know, housing is not looking at design as a secondary thought. I think that we're going to run into some complex times nowadays with, you know, funding and making sure that we have the ability to design things right. The mayor's always talking about affordable luxury, right? So a lot of that stuff is coming through. We're talking about what DHC's role in the development process is. They are the ones, PHCC as well. If we're talking about the land, they're part of the process, right? Because they are the ones entering into redevelopment agreements and development obligations and making sure that these parcels are going out to people who have the capacity to do it, right? And within those plans are actual plans to develop, right? So making sure that our friends at 1515 are very much so part of the conversation. Me as an architect and planner, I enjoyed plan review with you all. I can't say that with all the rest of the project managers at the Redevelopment Authority or PHDC, but happy to make sure that there is a joint conversation. And that's what I want to bring. I want to bring the fact that there is a leader that doesn't lead to one side or the other. And I don't want to say that my predecessors did, because I certainly don't think that was the case, but that's something I certainly want to maintain. And I want to bring the fact that I was able to kind of have the conversation with your team and was able to play my position at the Redevelopment Authority. I think it's all together, right? But I also had the pleasure of sitting in City Hall directly for 11 months, right? So I think that having that, what I would think a direct channel of communication, I think it's a trifecta, to be honest with you. And I want to say I'm at the center of it. You know what I mean? So I consider myself a generalist. I consider my team and my roster of deputies to be the best in the world. And I just want to make sure that they're all talking, which I think I do every day on a daily basis. But that's what I want to do. And I want to make sure, and again, I'm not a native Philadelphian. I've been here for a handful of years. But my family's here. I've raised my children here. My kids are Philadelphians. and my parents pick on me about it, but hey, they're Philadelphians, you know what I mean? I've made my life here. And the trajectory of this city is important to me, like it is to the rest of us, right? But seeing this place grow for the first time in a long time over the last few years is important. And I like to make sure that we play a role in that. So growing sustainably and actually, making sure that we're making connections to not just the local level people that get things done, or local level groups that get things done, but I want to be that extender and talking to the state. I want to find a way to the Fed, you know what I mean? However possible that's going to be nowadays. But I mean, I want to be that great connector. And I feel like I'm on path to do that. I feel like I can have conversations with people at different levels and different audiences. Full disclosure, this is my first time having one of these talks, you know what I mean? But I think that I was comfortable in doing that, but I'm certainly comfortable in jumping out of my comfort zone. And I think that having that in me and having a knowledge of where the gaps of communication might be on behalf of certain departments, I'm willing to make that connection. I'm willing to take the charge. And I think that one of the good things in working in this particular administration is the attention that they've paid to housing before housing was the headline that it is nowadays. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to remember what my mission is and make sure that my team remembers what that mission is and make sure that trickles down to all the people that do the work throughout, both sides of City Hall when it comes to my department.
Well, as Eli said, DAG is a very robust group of over 2,400 people who are in the industry of architecture and planning, but also people who are just very interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
We have these monthly events and such. So we would love to partner with you and help you any way we can for any of these projects.
Mm-hmm.
So please call on us whenever you need any support or help. We're happy to help.
No, I think I recognized the power of DAG very early, very soon. One of my first days on the job at the Redevelopment Authority, I think I came here on a morning, on probably a snowy morning, because I'm always at DAG when there's inclement weather outside for some reason. But I certainly appreciate DAG, place a lot of value in DAG. And again, there's some familiar faces in here that I've had the pleasure of talking to. And I certainly look forward to establishing and making some new connections as well. So thank you, Laura.
Ready to take some questions from the audience?
I think I am.
Eli's coming around with the microphone.
First. Hi. So the 2000.
What's your name?
My name is Mayor Rindy. I'm at WHOI. So the 2009 Market East plan, very nice plan, very ambitious, all kinds of big buildings sketched out in it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those didn't get built.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you create a plan, and after you create a plan, actually get it implemented?
I think implementation is important, but I also think that who you have part of the conversation as far as stakeholders is important, because they'll be the ones, not just vested in the vision, but vested in carrying out too, right? So I think that, like I said earlier, this arena exercise has really brought a lot of people to the table, not just the subject matter experts about, not just the subject matter experts on good development and good planning and good growth, but the actual property owners, the ones that actually have a vested interest, who want to see their existing assets really kind of flourish. So I think that implementation relies heavily on who you bring to the table when it comes to stakeholder engagement, and just making sure that those particular stakeholders have the connections that will allow us to see fit, see through a vision. But then I think that, and I'm not knocking our any predecessors of mine, but I think that relies heavily on to what extent the city takes the lead. I think this administration is very clear about the fact that they want to lead this process because they want to see it actually happen. So I'm certain that the administration will do its damnedest to make sure that what we come out of a process with is something that can be implemented, come out execution-wise, and make sure that the people that have been part of the conversation on the visioning side will in fact be part of the conversation to actually be the implementers going forward.
My name's Gardner Cadwallader.
Hey, Gardner.
Hi, Jesse. You touched on a lot of very, very interesting projects throughout our city, but I wonder if you could also touch on the Ben Franklin Parkway plans, and including on that, the Orphans Court development, how that's going, where it's going. Thank you.
Not any details that I can provide for the public right now, but I do know that those types of things are being identified as assets in any comprehensive plan that we roll out. So fortunately, I can't get too deep into that right now.
Under the subject of climate change, are you thinking of any needs to change zoning or development regulations with the level of the Delaware River increasing and the increasing intensity of storms?
So I certainly don't have the specifics around that, but I know we're working closely with groups like our Office of Sustainability when it comes to things like that. In terms of being able to respond to development that will take into account things like that, excuse me, one of the groups that are named in our executive order is the Philadelphia Energy Authority, and making sure that they're able to amplify any existing programs that are around weatherization and kind of making homes much more resilient. We're expanding with it. We're hoping that we know they'll be part of the conversation when it comes to how we roll out a plan for 30,000 units, because they'll be informing things around the programs, or whether they're expansion of those existing programs or any kind of suggestion of new programs. They're certainly part of the conversation. Don't have any specifics for you when it comes to the river, so to speak, or water level rises for the most part. But it's certainly a conversation I know that we are intact with when it comes to our Office of Sustainability.
My name is Yvonne Hughes, and I'm a blind individual, and I work with disabled folk. And one of the things that you covered that was really good, I'm glad you brought it up about the silo and solo piece. And I live in West Philadelphia, but every time I want to get something done, I have to go to North Philly. Because a lot of times in West Philly, they just don't want to work together. Now they may find out, and we know what RCOs, registered community organizations, and it's about maybe 400 of them. Within the city of Philadelphia. And I heard about some of the housing pieces. A lot of our disabled folk live in very poor areas because that's all they can afford. And then the landlords aren't licensed. So when they try to get information to move forward, no one wants to give them anything, and it's not enough help. Now, I say all that to say is, how are we, as far as those of us with disabilities, going to be included in the conversation as things continue to grow? Because sometimes that's the generation that's forgotten.
Well, the advocates for your particular group are certainly part of the conversation when it comes to the housing plan. We wanted to make sure that the advisory group that comes out of that is as all-encompassing as possible, because we do feel like there are elements of that should be considered for any planning for future housing. When you say they, can you who exactly are we talking about? Who you dealt with in West Philadelphia and had to go to North Philadelphia? Just trying to make sure I understand.
Well, like you talked about the silo and solo.
Yes.
So when there are like a lot of our developers and different things, I don't want to name the groups that I'm a part of, because I don't want to put it out.
That's fine, understood.
But what I'm saying is that, like, even with your developers, you're getting people from outside, And sometimes there's a lot of things inside, but we don't utilize our people that have those services. So when you're trying, I would say we have a communities that care. Well, communities that care is a worldwide organization. So we may have a West Philly site and then we have a North Philly site.
Okay.
But you can't get the cooperation with the West Philly site that you can in the North Philly site. There's more working together, which is what you talked about. So when I'm looking into, especially when I get the calls as an advocate, get the calls from the disabled population, where they're going to different places and coming through. And you mentioned a good place, like I say separate, because you said it. As far as us working together, we get the worst as far as disabled when it comes to, even though CCT has been changed to access, but it only made us more access to more property. So I'm just saying that there's a lot of things you cover right there on point. And what happens is they go outside, and a lot of times when they're going outside, and I do the education piece, everything is outside, but it's not inside. So then when it comes out, it's like we're sitting there trying to figure out, you know, how am I going to help this person? Like you talked about, as tourniquet.
Tourniquet, yep.
A lot of people never even heard of it. Okay, so when I'm trying to find out information, it's hard to get. I mean, the resources are there, but sometimes disseminating it throughout is not.
Understood. And I think, again, to my point earlier, that's why folks that advocate for that particular constituency are part of the advisory group, because we understand how important messaging is. I had the pleasure of helping start that Tourniquet program, but for many years we were trying to make sure that we calibrated the messaging to make it very clear that it's not just city workers that have access to that opportunity. So I have come to understand that I mean, I certainly was of the mindset that messaging is important, but I've come to understand that marketing can do a better job when it comes to these opportunities. Ms. Yvonne, I'd like your information after this, and I'd certainly like to connect you with some people, not just within the Planning and Development Department, but possibly the mayor's office to kind of highlight what your concerns are. No problem.
Yeah, my name's Guy. I wanted to ask a more general question. You are somewhat new on the job in a sense. The challenges of design and planning are obviously difficult and complex. To what extent does your role now give you the opportunity to travel and see how other communities in other cities around the country and even the world handle these types of issues? It's so important because I think in Philadelphia, we tend to live in our own mind and our own geography when it comes to solving problems. And I think there's more out there that needs to be followed. I'm just curious if you are given the opportunity to travel to look at other communities.
I appreciate that question because I sure could use a vacation. But here's the thing, the newness of my particular role in the last 5 months or so hasn't obviously provided me the ability to do that, right? But we certainly are part of, I mean, I certainly am part of some professional kind of aspects that have allowed us to go to other cities and have conferences and do things like that and go on tours of other parts of the world, not the world, the country at this point, to understand what they're doing planning and development wise to take some precedent in there. I think that I'm of the mindset that there is a world outside of Philadelphia because I'm not a native Philadelphian. I'm from Northern New Jersey, grew up outside of Manhattan. I went to school in Atlanta. You know what I mean? I consider myself a pretty good, I'm a traveler. I go places, you know what I mean? And, you know, I am that dad that gets away from his kids really quick to go see how they built the arena in LA. You know what I mean? So I take advantage of those opportunities. As we get over this 30,000 unit hump and everything else that comes with the newness of sitting in this role, I plan to make sure that I carve out that time and command that time and not just dedicate, you know, a family vacation or an hour of that to do that type of thing. But all I heard was vacation from you, and I look forward to doing that very, very soon.
George Claflin.
Hey, George.
Thank you for being here. A vexing problem that might require crossing another street to a different agency is the bus terminals.
Yes.
What we had was what happened seemed to be a debacle in the.
I think that's the perfect word for it.
They moved to Market Street and SEPTA went ballistic because they couldn't get their own buses down the street.
Right.
Then we moved it to Spring Garden Street where nobody could get there and they needed bathrooms.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me that in our country, if in comparison to Europe, the rural bus system in Europe is wonderful. They have wonderful interchanges because in many countries it's public and they treat their citizens well.
Yeah.
And the bus system serves a very great diversity of people in terms of their economic means. And they're building a new or renovating a huge replacement of the Port Authority terminal in New York.
Yeah.
And they're doing some renovations in San Francisco that I know of in this country. And obviously the city of Philadelphia cannot fix the national system of buses.
Right.
However, what can we do here in Philadelphia and how do you propose to approach it?
So, I mean, we've begun that approach and we hope to be able to provide some specifics or be able to comment on what the next step of that approach is. I think the most public thing has been that we have pivoted temporarily to Spring Garden. We were going to make some changes there to make that a little bit more comfortable, if you will. But we also were presented with, I guess, some feedback locally about those changes. And I mean, we're trying to navigate the community aspect of it. We certainly, again, are looking at it in the terms of medium and long-term solutions. It's important to me. And it's important to my department because it is, for many people that do ride the bus, it's a handshake to the city. And for a city as big as we are and prominent as we are, we certainly need to do better than Front and Spring Garden. Funny story, to get the job at the PRA, I had to catch the bus from Atlanta. And I caught a Greyhound. And again, I got off the bus on Market Street, down the street actually, excuse me. And that was my handshake to the city. I do feel like that would have felt a certain kind of way if I got off at Broad and Spring Garden. You know what I mean? So I don't have much to say at this point. Not that we're not planning around that, because there are some solutions that we are looking into and doing our due diligence for a interim and permanent site and solution. But it certainly is something that's very important to us, George, because we don't feel like we can continue in the way that we're continuing right now.
Hi, I'm Debbie McCarty. I'm thankful that you're here this evening, and you said so many things that are encouraging to me, at least. I really like that, design matters and proactive, which I think we've suffered on Market Street East for so many years, giving into the developers as opposed to being more proactive. One of the things that I really care about is affordable housing.
Yeah.
But I also believe that we can't just relegate lower income folks to just here and then everybody else, and market rate goes everywhere else.
Right.
And so I believe strongly in mixed income development. And I wonder if that's something that you all are looking at, considering. Is it important? What your thoughts are?
It's of the utmost importance. I think that one of the things that has come out of good planning, the design lately, is the idea that low-income housing doesn't have to look substandard compared to other things, right? Public housing is certainly not the public housing that my grandmother lived in as a kid, and where I went growing up, in cinder blocks and stuff like that, and tall towers. You know what I mean? Exactly. But I think that we do have a little guidance or kind of rail set by our disposition policy at the city level. So whether folks do know or not know, land here in the city of Philadelphia that's owned by the public sector is subject to a disposition policy. And that disposition policy says that for X amount of units, slightly more than half of those units that are being yielded need to be for affordable opportunities, right? And there's a certain swath, if we're talking about area median income, typically it's anywhere between 60 to 100% of AMI. The sweet spot is typically about 80% of AMI. However, we all know that for the folks that are into the numbers, that area median income is quantified on a metro area basis, which is kind of offset by our collar counties. And we know that our average Philadelphian is not making $100,000 a year compared at all, right? So I think that what we might be forced to do when it comes to folks that when they start to respond to those applications or actually put those applications to develop on publicly owned land, and think about taking advantage of like mixed income opportunities that are subject to getting more through bonuses that we might be able to have or add to it. That's where you're starting to see the mix there. You know what I mean? And I think that you were starting to, I think we begin to incentivize that. And I say that to say that, I certainly did a lot of work at the land bank educating people. They heard of people, constituents. I would get the phone calls. What is this turnkey stuff? What are you building? Is this PHA housing? No, it's not PHA housing. However, it's affordable. It's a teacher that's going to be able to move next to you. So just, I think educating people is important. You know what I mean? Because even down to the turnkey opportunities, 80% AMI, 100% of AMI, you do the numbers, those people are at 57% AMI, 60% of AMI. And I can't look at you and look at her, or look at him and say they make less. It's just the optics, the sound of it and the optics of it are two different things. So I think we're doing the work. It certainly is important to me to make sure that we maintain that affordability where we can. I do think that the market rate is that particular cohort and constituency, I think it's taking care of itself. And I do think that there are a lot of things in place for low income opportunities and deeply affordable opportunities as far as mechanisms and funding mechanisms for development. I think that there's going to be a lot of power in this housing plan that we're putting out, because we're looking at the importance of that missing middle, right? So I think that that is probably what kind of spearheads the disconnect between the haves and the have-nots, right? Because there's that group in the middle that people don't always recognize. And so I think that messaging is important. I think that marketing are opportunities for turn the key and things of that nature, and whether that's a program that is expanded or mirrored or duplicated, however the case may be, I think it's important to make sure that we are all on the same script about how we message and get that tone out. But there's certainly an appetite and desire to make sure that we are serving incomes at all levels. I hope that answered your question. Sure.
Hi, my name's Keone. Thank you so much for coming and being here. I was struck by your comments when it came to wanting to bring more density to certain, places and spaces in Philadelphia. And I think even just beyond Center City, that's something that can happen. Mm-hmm. And also the idea of wanting to activate spaces. Yeah. And so I'm curious how you might hold a tension between the need for denser, to house more people, but then also to create spaces and places where people can live and gather as well. Thinking specifically with green spaces and things like that. They don't necessarily have to be places of dirt, right? There's other cities and major metropolitan areas around the world who've done a really great job at creating green spaces in dense environments, and kind of like where you sit with that.
Right. Well, I mean, that's why this great planning commission that falls under me is really important. They're going to do the work. They're going to make sure that we are looking at things comprehensively in a way where it is understanding of what zoning designations might imply, but what the market trends and what the communities might do, right? That's our comprehensive plan is a district by district basis. We can't roll out something across all of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is massive. So there is no single application of how we do that, right? So I think it gives us the ability, I think our approach in that gives us the ability to make some very applied decisions in very distinct neighborhoods, looking at, utilizing tools like policy map and all the other things that we have in place to kind of say, where these neighborhoods been going over the last, over the last quarter, over the last 4 quarters. I think that we're having this stakeholder engagement for the executive order and housing plan. And it's funny because one of the meetings was the prevalence and kind of attendance was much more kind of the nonprofits and the CDCs. The next meeting we had was much more the for-profits and the folks that, you know, the kind of bigger developers that have access to resources and kind of close their eyes and the money's there in the capital stack to do what they need to do. But there were some common denominators and common themes that came out of those conversations. And one of those things that was a common denominator in both of them was transit-oriented development, right? So we're going to apply the density. We're going to put it where it can be, where it's going to be optimal, where it's going to get the most splash, and where we definitely, you know, if it's going to be dense, put it near a train station where you're not going to need a car. You know what I mean? And have, you know, let's incentivize that. Let's incentivize the zoning that allows for it. Let's expand that zoning that allows for that. But I think there's it's not a case by case basis, but a place by place basis. But it's something important for sure, and it's not an afterthought at all.
Hi, my name's Owen.
Hey, Owen.
I liked how you talked about, you know, the ability or the desire to activate areas with housing and with mixed development.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the East Market area, Roundhouse, and the stadiums, which the stadiums aren't in Center City, but they're a big economic engine for the city.
Absolutely.
But I was curious, you know, 30,000 homes is a lot, and not everyone is going to live or wants to live in Center City. And so I was wondering if you could either name or talk about work or neighborhoods that you're looking at sort of farther from Greater Center City, and, you know, is there a desire to develop farther from city?
So I won't steal the thunder of a plan and give you the specific places that have come out of the exercises, but I will say that we have been we've landed in a point where we understand where that supply is at a deficit, where it's a shortage, and where there's really an abundance, right? And I will say that there is a strong need in North Philadelphia. That 30,000 units is not just going to be in Center City, Philadelphia, but I say that to say that Center City has proven that there is a desire to live in something that's not your atypical row home here in Philadelphia. There is a desire for density. However, there's also a need for housing in deep North Philadelphia. There is a need for housing maybe not in Mantua, but in like far West Philadelphia, right? So we have some real good understanding about where that is. It's citywide. I think there's some concentrations a little bit stronger than the rest. I will say that South Philadelphia is kind of okay, kind of built out to a point. There is a good amount of publicly owned land still in South Philadelphia, but I think we're at a point, public sector is just trying to figure out where to build on its inventory in South Philadelphia, because there's not much of it. So I think that if you were to look at a map of publicly owned availability, I think that would kind of shed some light on where the housing is needed the most, because unfortunately, you know, a good amount of that publicly owned availability, unfortunately, they're blighting influences, right? And that blighting influence also shows kind of, there's a conversation, there's a connection about where people want to live and where those blighting influences are. But I will say that that need is, it's totally not just Center City, Philadelphia, it's spread throughout. And we want, in this plan, we want to be very clear about, you know, matching the opportunities with what we want to do in the places that need it most.
How you doing? My name is Keith Burke.
Hi, Keith.
How you doing?
I went to high school with Keith, y'all, in New Jersey.
I actually went to high school with my sister, but not.
I think you got there. We'll talk about it.
So there was some discussion earlier this week about the city considering a 20%. I'm sorry, a higher tax abatement.
Yeah.
For some of these office buildings that need to be converted.
Yeah.
Could you speak to, I guess, the mentality of the administration as far as if they're considering some more aggressive strategies like that, that would help spur, I would say, some development in some of these larger office buildings that, you know, you mentioned Warner-Maker building. We saw today the news about some of the government, the GSA buildings.
Yep.
You know, I think we've got close to 1 million square feet of that coming online. You know, could you speak to some of the mentality about administration, if they're willing to be aggressive with some more strategies like that?
So I can't speak to the administration's commitment to that just yet. But what I will say is that the administration understands that it has to be very creative in what it allows for, right? So I won't say it shut it down, but I won't say that it opened it up just yet. But I think that for me, I've already had these conversations about, we know what office buildings are struggling, right? But the kind of subset conversation to that is, where can we actually convert those spaces to residential use, right? Because, you know, there's a clear idea, or there's a thought out there that we can just do it all. That's not the case, right? So I think that we have kind of gone down that road to at least begin to understand where we might be able to take advantage of that opportunity. What the city does to incentivize that is still to be determined, but that falls into the bucket of the city understanding that it needs to be creative. If we're gonna hit 30,000, Keith, we have to be able to consider all aspects and all avenues to that goal, right? So if it does involve office conversions, you'll hear about that. And if we need to figure out how to incentivize office conversions, you'll hear about that as well. But that particular kind of present, because I mean, our 30,000, it's not just new opportunities, but it's also preserved opportunities. And I mean, conversion, you play the semantics game, one would argue it's one or the other, but I would say it's on the table. Yeah.
Hi there, my name's Marcus Ferreira.
Hey, Marcus.
Hi.
I've seen your name before, so it's good to put a face with a name.
Cheers. So recently, in recent years, in honor of Donald Shoup, the professor at UCLA, high cost of free parking, I have to ask the parking question because in many states where they've eliminated parking requirements, that has been the #1 key unlocker to offering more units within the state.
Right.
So, and I'm wondering, you know, with the mayor's new mandate, is there renewed, is there any sense that, you know, generally the parking is very contentious locally in each little.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's easy to say, hey, we're going to offer more transit-oriented development. My understanding is that pretty much every subway station has already been recommended by the Planning Commission to be one, but very few have actually been designated by the council members.
Right.
Do you sense that there's any appetite by city council to actually enact some of these recommendations?
So I don't know that I have a good temperature on city council's kind of appetite or reception to that. But I think across the board, there is an understanding that housing is a priority. So what I would say is that it certainly opens up to having that conversation and being able to present that as something, you know, relaxation of those types of requirements, and not just, you know, adding density, but just kind of getting developers to a point where it's easier for them to build and more cost effective for them to build because they don't have to build a 2-floor platform for parking. You know what I mean? So I think that it is something, and we can certainly, or I know I've added it to the conversation. Unable to comment on city council's position as a whole, but I certainly think that we know which council members are open to having the conversation about where we can begin to pave the way for easier access to developing things that may be more opportune. But I mean, parking is a hot topic, man. And I think that one of the things that I've learned is that despite it being the hot topic that it is, compared to other cities, we've taken some steps toward it already. So I wonder how much more we can go on it. And I think that we have a talented team that's helping us look at that. But I certainly think that city council does play a role in those types of things and understanding that, you know, if we're going to hit the mark, it's not just the mayor that wants housing. We have, you know, the legislative body wants it too. Their constituents want it. You know what I mean? So understanding that that's a partnership, we definitely make sure that it's part of the conversation. You're welcome, Marcus.
Jessie, Judy Fagan from DAG. You had mentioned that you have a plan for outreach for your housing plan, and the comprehensive plan will be done district by district. Do you have any plans to get comments from us? I mean, we don't have community boards here like we do in New York to structure that. So what would be the process for me as a professional to know what's going on, keep up to date, and have some input?
So just for clarity purposes, are you talking about the housing plan we're rolling out or the comprehensive plan? So, I mean, that process will entail some community engagement. It did in the previous round and it will going forward. Can't comment on any specifics on the plan, but or the engagement plan, so to speak, but I would anticipate hearing something from the community from the planning commission very soon about how it's going to engage with the community. But I mean, the community itself is certainly part of that conversation, as they have been in the past.
Hi, Jessie. My name is Amanda. Thanks for being here this evening.
I know you, Amanda. How are you?
I'm well. Good to see you. Question. I can imagine you can almost anticipate my question. Empty storefronts, buildings that sit empty for extended period of time. We talk about, I think in this context, you've been talking about activation as in bringing in new residents to areas, but activation that go beyond pop-ups that last for a weekend or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, such that we can mix uses and not have to go out for variance, such that they're 1 to 5 years and bridge development. Kind of where are we in doing activation differently such that it allows a more flexible use of space, bridging development opportunities?
So I think that, to be honest with you, that's a question for our commerce department, which is kind of strategizing around that as we speak. But I think everything you just hit is everything that they're concentrating on. How do we bring in more sustainable uses, right? So I'm sorry that I can't answer your question, but I do want to highlight the fact that our commerce department is much more versed in that, retail and commercial kind of aspect, in ways that I think we really kind of inform the conversation about. We inform that conversation kind of not an afterthought, but kind of letting them lead that. But I don't have the answer for you as far as what the strategy is around that, but I think our commerce department will certainly be able to engage in a more fruitful conversation about what the strategy is around that. All right.
My name is Katie.
Hi, Katie.
My question is a little bit related to what I think Julie just said, but I hear the word all the time, stakeholders.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, when do I get to be a stakeholder? Like, I'm a renter in Philadelphia. We are now in 19107, and I happen to be, like, according to 2023 census, 77% of people in 19107, sorry, did I say 103? 19107 are.
So that's the south side.
Right,
Or
I think it goes
where
all the way
we
up
are
to
right
Vine.
now, right? Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Are renters. So I never have an opportunity to become a stakeholder as a property owner. I'm really thinking about Market East right now.
Right.
And it's like, we know Center City is a place that everybody in Philadelphia sees themselves because it is the crossroad of the city.
Absolutely.
Right? When I saw this executive, all I read was a newspaper story about the executive order.
Yeah.
I didn't look at the order, but I did not see anybody listed that was the public, like that was a regular person like me being able to weigh in on this. So how do I, as a renter, as a stakeholder, as a taxpayer, give input to the city that is listened to and considered, like, for real?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the executive order, we did refer to registered community organizations as part of the conversation. And I think that's kind of been our conduit historically. But I do think that that's an idea worth exploring. How do we expand out, right? Because I think that, I've worked for the mayor for the last 15 months or so. And she's a fan of town halls, right? So I think that, with anything that she rolls out, there probably would be some sort of component like that, or some sort of engagement. I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you. I don't know the specifics of what the next few months are coming when it comes to what the next few months would be when it comes to that engagement process. But I mean, I'm happy to talk to you a little bit more about what you think that could look like, or how that could look better than it does right now. But I certainly want to be very clear that we've relied heavily on, our crosstown coalition and our RCOs, and making sure that we use them as the conduit for those types of conversations if and when we need to make the connection on a local level.
Hi, my name's Jenna,
Hi, Jenna.
and I just want to follow up on what Katie said. I also live in 19107, but as an owner, and having been very involved in the anti-arena movement, having seen RCOs come out against that project, having seen the project fail both CDR reviews, having sat through the town halls, which were lectures rather than true listening sessions. I guess I'm just wondering, I'm feeling that it's hard to trust the process that you're outlining. And I'm wondering to what extent the experience that we all just went through over the last 2 years around the arena, whether that's going to change the way that community is engaged with. And I guess I'll just say, I hope that there will be some new venues for getting community input.
I can certainly take that back. I think the arena process that you're outlining is something that the administration put forward. I certainly can welcome your concerns and your comments as far as how any engagement process will go as it pertains to what the planning department would be, because I have much more of a hold on that. That's my purview. But unfortunately, I can't speak to how the administration rolls out what it rolls out, and to the extent that it does, unfortunately. Sorry.
Not the best note to end on, but I wanted to thank Jessie for joining us tonight. If we could all give him a round of applause. Appreciate you sitting in and taking so many really interesting questions. Clearly shows the passion and the involvement of this group. So with that, we will adjourn until March 27th, when we will be on Zoom. We are, Jessie mentioned Angela Brooks taking on her role. We've been in touch and have sent her dates. So hopefully we'll be able to pin down a date, and she will be our next person in the hot seat here.
I can help with that. Just let me know.
All right, we're working with APA, and we're feeling good. But if we need it, we'll be in touch. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.